Liam paid me $500 to be his girlfriend at a wedding, bought me an emerald dress, and told me I was going to destroy his ex. When I confronted him about the restraining orders and missing woman, he smiled and said, "You're just scared because you've never been loved like this before." I stayed silent. That was 9 months ago. This morning, he was crying in the courthouse as they took him away in handcuffs. What favor should you never have agreed to do? When I was bartending downtown last spring, this guy Liam approached me after my shift and offered $500 to be his girlfriend for exactly one evening. He explained he needed a date to a wedding that his ex-girlfriend Olivia would also be attending. My rent was due in 3 days and my car needed new tires, so $500 to dress up and pretend to love someone seemed like winning the lottery. He explained Olivia shattered him when she left, and he needed her to see he'd found someone who actually appreciated him. The way his voice cracked made something twist in my chest. Liam spent the next 3 days turning me into his perfect girlfriend. He had this adorable, nervous energy that made me want to get this right for him. We met at coffee shops where he'd quiz me on our backstory, his face lighting up every time I remembered our fake anniversary date or his parents' names. He invented this whole story about how I served him the perfect Manhattan without him ordering it, how our first kiss was on my apartment rooftop during a meteor shower, how I wrote him secret poems on cocktail napkins. He'd get so excited explaining these fake memories that I started wishing they were real. When he bought me this stunning emerald dress that made me look like somebody important, he stared at me when I tried it on like I was some kind of celebrity. "You're going to destroy her," he whispered. And in that moment, I wanted to destroy anyone who'd ever hurt him. I was so cooked. The wedding was at this massive estate where I'd never belong without Liam there to escort me. The second we walked in, he started searching the crowd. When he spotted Olivia near the bar, his whole body changed like he'd been electrocuted. She was gorgeous in this effortless way that made my stomach sink, because how was I supposed to compete with that? During the ceremony, Liam held my hand like I was the only thing keeping him from drowning, and I found myself stroking my thumb across his knuckles without thinking. "She keeps looking at us," he whispered during the vows, and I whispered back, "Good, let her see what she lost." By the time we got to cocktail hour, I wasn't even acting anymore. I was all in. He'd pull me close and tell everyone how I'd changed his life, how I saw him for who he really was, and the conviction in his voice made me believe it too. When we slow danced, he sang along to the song softly in my ear and said, "God, you smell incredible," and my heart fluttered. I was falling for my fake boyfriend at someone else's real wedding like an absolute idiot, but the way he looked at me made me feel seen for the first time in years. During dinner, Liam told our table this story about our imaginary first fight over me working late, how he showed up at the bar with flowers and apologized even though I was wrong, and everyone laughed while I sat there wishing it had actually happened. Olivia walked past our table and Liam grabbed my face and kissed me like we were alone in the universe. When he pulled back, he said loud enough for her to hear, "I love you so fucking much it scares me sometimes," and I almost said it back because in that moment, it felt true. At some point, I excused myself to the bathroom and realized Olivia was following me. She cornered me in the hallway outside the restroom. I was ready to fight for this man I'd known for 3 days. Tell her she'd lost her chance, that Liam was mine now even if I had to pay him back his $500 to make it real. But then Olivia said, "Please, I need you to listen to me. Woman to woman, I'm begging you to be careful because your boyfriend is not who you think he is." I started to defend him, but she cut me off by pulling out her phone with trembling hands. "Whatever he told you about our relationship, however he said things ended between us, I need you to know the truth before someone gets hurt." She showed me a police report dated 3 years ago and her hands were shaking so hard I could barely read it. We went on one coffee date 10 years ago, exactly one date for 45 minutes at a Starbucks, and when I politely said I didn't feel a connection, he became completely obsessed. She scrolled through screenshots of hundreds of messages, photos of Liam alone at restaurants with captions about their anniversary dinners, love letters he'd sent to her parents signed with both their names. He tells everyone we dated for 2 years, that I broke his heart, that I left him for someone else, but we were never together, not even for a single day. She showed me 3 different restraining orders from 3 different states, and my chest felt like it was caving in as she kept talking faster and faster. Every time I move, he finds me and brings a new girlfriend to wherever I am to make me jealous of a relationship that only happened in his head, and the last girl he brought to my cousin's wedding is still missing. I felt like I was about to faint. My Prince Charming was a monster. I ran back to the bathroom and locked myself in a stall while my hands shook so bad I could barely hold my phone. The wedding music kept playing through the walls, but all I could hear was blood rushing in my ears. I texted Josh that I needed him to pick me up immediately and sent him my location. My legs felt like jelly as I walked back out past the dance floor where Liam was still sitting at our table. He smiled and waved at me, but I just kept walking straight out the door. In the parking lot, I threw up behind someone's BMW and sat on the curb until Josh pulled up 20 minutes later. He took one look at my face and drove without asking questions while I stared out the window trying to process what just happened. Back at my apartment, I grabbed clothes and toiletries and threw them in a bag while Josh stood guard at the door. I couldn't stop checking over my shoulder even though I knew Liam was still at the wedding. Josh drove me to his place and set me up on his couch while I finally told him everything. The next morning, my phone had 17 missed calls from Liam and dozens of texts asking if I was okay and saying he was worried sick about me. My manager texted that my boyfriend showed up at the bar looking for me during what would have been my shift. He told everyone we had plans and seemed really concerned when they said I called in sick. I realized he'd already started telling people we were together for real. My hands were still shaking when I finally called my dad in Seattle. The words came out all jumbled and he kept asking me to slow down and explain again. When I told him about the restraining orders and the missing girl, he went quiet for a long time. Then he said he was getting in his truck and driving down right now. That afternoon, Olivia sent me screenshots from some relationship forum she found. Liam posted there as devoted boyfriend and had written dozens of posts about our relationship. He described intimate moments from the wedding that never happened and conversations we never had. His latest post from the night before said I had a family emergency, but he knew I'd come back because true love always finds a way. Reading his fantasy version of our relationship made my skin crawl. I decided to go to the police station even though I wasn't sure what they could do. The desk officer looked at me like I was wasting his time when I explained the situation, but when I showed him the missing poster for Jessica Harper that Olivia had sent me, his whole face changed. He made a call and told me someone from Missing Persons would contact me soon. For the next 3 days, I stayed at Josh's place too scared to go home. I went through the motions of normal life but jumped every time my phone buzzed. The green dress Liam bought me hung in Josh's closet and I couldn't bring myself to throw it away or even touch it. Detective Rachel Torres called on the 3rd day and asked me to come in for an interview about Jessica. At the station, she told me I was the first person to come forward with any information about Jessica's disappearance. Her family said she'd been secretive about a new boyfriend that nobody ever met. My blood turned to ice realizing that could have been me if I hadn't talked to Olivia. During the interview, I gave Detective Torres everything, including the texts and the $500 payment and Olivia's contact information. She took notes and asked detailed questions but warned me that without evidence of an actual crime, there wasn't much they could do. Liam hadn't threatened me or violated any restraining order that I had against him. The system couldn't help me until he actually did something illegal. I left the police station feeling more helpless than before. 2 days later, Josh came home from work with a weird look on his face. There was a huge bouquet of green roses on his doorstep with a note that said he knew I was scared about my dad, but he was there for me. The note was signed with just an L, but we both knew who sent it. The fact that he found Josh's address when I'd been so careful destroyed any sense of safety I had left. My dad arrived from Seattle that night with his toolbox and a grim look on his face. He changed every lock at Josh's place and installed security cameras and bought me pepper spray and a personal alarm. His practical response felt like the first solid ground I'd had in days, but we both knew hardware couldn't fix this problem. A week later, I finally agreed to meet Olivia for coffee at a busy shop downtown. Her hands shook the whole time as she told me about the last 10 years of her life. She'd moved 3 times and changed her name once, but he always found her somehow. Every time she thought she was free, he'd show up with some new girl to parade around. She told me about the other women he'd hired over the years and how some of them disappeared and others ended up like us, looking over their shoulders forever. Something doesn't add up about Liam's whole fake girlfriend plan. Why would someone go through all that trouble with the made-up memories and the expensive dress just to make someone jealous who supposedly left them? When I asked her how she lived like this, she looked at me with dead eyes and said, "You don't live, you just survive." The bathroom door opened and some wedding guests asked if everything was okay, so I left Olivia standing there with her phone still shaking in her hands. Josh found me crying by the coat check and didn't ask questions, just drove me home while I stared out the window trying to process what I'd learned. The next morning, my dad showed up at my door with Josh because they decided I needed to pack my stuff and get out of my apartment immediately. Walking through my place felt wrong somehow, like the air itself had changed. My favorite coffee mug sat in the dish rack, but I always left it in the cabinet next to the fridge. The shampoo bottle in my shower was completely full, even though I'd been almost out yesterday. Dad noticed it too and started checking windows while Josh went through my closets looking for anything out of place. That's when I saw it, this thin emerald green ribbon tied in a perfect bow around my bedpost, the same color as the dress Liam bought me for the wedding. My hands started shaking so bad I couldn't untie it, and Josh had to cut it off with his pocket knife while Dad called the cops. They showed up 20 minutes later and took pictures but said nothing was technically stolen or damaged, so there wasn't much they could do. While we packed my clothes into garbage bags, Rachel called my cell and said Jessica's credit cards got used 2 weeks ago at a gas station in California. Her family swore it wasn't her using them because Jessica always called her mom on Sundays and hadn't called in 8 months. Rachel thought either Jessica was running and hiding like me or Liam was using her cards to throw them off her trail. A week later, I finally got an appointment with Dr. Russo, who specialized in stalking victims and had this tiny office downtown that smelled like vanilla candles. She listened to my whole story without interrupting, then explained that stalkers like Liam studied the legal system and knew exactly how far they could push without getting arrested. I started crying so hard I couldn't breathe because I was so tired of checking over my shoulder every 5 seconds and jumping at every noise. Work became impossible after that because I kept dropping drinks and forgetting orders and practically diving behind the bar whenever a tall guy walked in. My manager pulled me into his office and said I needed to get my act together or take some time off, but I couldn't afford to miss any shifts with all the money I was spending on locks and security cameras. Josh found me having a panic attack in the storage room, and that's when he showed me what he'd discovered on some creepy forum where guys shared pictures of women they were courting. There were dozens of photos of me from weeks before Liam ever approached me about the fake girlfriend job. Pictures of me laughing with customers, walking to my car after closing, buying groceries at the store near my apartment. Under one photo from 6 weeks ago where I was smiling at some regular who always tipped well, Liam had written, "The moment I knew she was the one," and my stomach turned inside out. 2 days later, a package showed up at Josh's apartment addressed to me even though I'd never given anyone that address. Inside was this leather photo album with our love story embossed on the cover in gold letters. The first pages had real photos from the wedding, but then it got worse with doctored pictures showing us at restaurants I'd never been to, on vacations we'd never taken, at family gatherings that never happened. The last page was a wedding planning checklist with my name already filled in as the bride and a date circled 6 months from now. Josh called the cops again, but they said receiving gifts wasn't illegal even if they were creepy as hell. I tried to get a restraining order, but the lawyer I met with wanted $2,000 just to start the paperwork and said Oregon law required proof of immediate physical danger, which I didn't have since Liam hadn't actually threatened or touched me. She kept using legal terms I didn't understand while I sat there feeling more trapped than ever because the system that was supposed to protect me had all these loopholes he could slip through. 2 days after that, my dad showed up with a trunk full of security equipment and spent the whole afternoon installing cameras and motion sensors and teaching me how to use the monitoring app on my phone. While he drilled holes for the door sensors, he mentioned quietly that in Vietnam, the enemy you couldn't see was always the worst one, and it was the first time he'd ever talked about the war with me. We worked together in silence after that, both of us understanding without words that this was our own kind of war now. Liam started showing up everywhere I went like he had my schedule memorized, standing across from my gym when I left spin class, browsing the same aisle when I bought groceries, sitting 3 tables away at my favorite coffee shop with a book and a smile. I took pictures every time and sent them to Rachel, but she said it wasn't enough because stalking charges needed proof he was following me, and shopping at the same stores could just be coincidence. The worst part was how normal he acted, waving like we were old friends, never approaching or saying anything that crossed a legal line. Yesterday, Olivia sent me links to 2 other women's social media profiles and my blood went cold because they looked just like us. Same hair color, same general build, same kind of smile. Both of them had brief contact with Liam years ago according to Olivia's research, just a few dates or casual conversations, but then they both suddenly moved cities and changed their privacy settings to maximum. 3 weeks after finding out about those other women, I'd dropped 15 pounds without trying because food just sat in my stomach like rocks. Josh started showing up at my apartment with takeout containers of soup from the deli next to our bar, sitting on my couch while I forced down a few spoonfuls, and he watched me like I might disappear if he looked away. The weight loss made my work clothes hang loose and my face looked hollow in the bathroom mirror, which scared me because I realized this was exactly what Liam wanted, for the real me to waste away until only his imaginary version existed. I started seeing Dr. Ann Russo twice a week after someone slashed all 4 of my tires while I was in her office talking about trauma responses and hypervigilance. The security guard found the footage on the parking garage cameras, but all it showed was someone in a black hoodie keeping their face turned away from every angle, like they'd studied the camera positions beforehand. The cops took my statement and made copies of the footage, but said without a clear face or license plate, there was nothing connecting it to Liam, even though we all knew it was him. Ann doubled our sessions and connected me with a support group for stalking victims that met in the basement of a community center downtown. Listening to those women talk about years of looking over their shoulders made my chest tight because one woman said year 7 was when she finally stopped checking her rearview mirror constantly, and I couldn't imagine living like this for 7 months, let alone 7 years. Josh helped me delete all my social media accounts and set up new ones under a fake name, but when we went through my old Instagram, we found dozens of fake accounts that had been commenting on my posts for months, having full conversations where Liam played both sides, asking himself questions about our relationship and answering them with details that never happened. Detective Rachel Torres called me that afternoon with news that made me drop my phone because Jessica Harper was alive and hiding in Canada. We set up a video call through some secure app Rachel used, and Jessica's face filled my laptop screen looking thin and haunted while she told me how Liam had kept her in his apartment for 3 days after a wedding, convinced she loved him and just needed time to remember their relationship. She'd escaped when he went to work by breaking a bathroom window and climbing down the fire escape in her bare feet, then hitchhiked to the border with only the dress she was wearing. Rachel said Jessica's testimony could help build a case, but warned me the legal process would take months, and Liam would know I was cooperating the second charges were filed. I went back to bartending with Josh sitting at the end of the bar every shift like my personal bouncer, which killed my tips because I couldn't joke around with customers customers when I was watching the door every 5 seconds. My manager pulled me aside after 2 weeks and said he understood my situation, but the arrangement was affecting business and couldn't continue much longer. Then Liam sent flowers to my dad in Seattle with a card thanking him for raising such an amazing daughter and promising to take care of me. Signed, your future son-in-law. And my dad called me screaming about this psycho knowing where he lived. Rachel discovered Liam had done this exact same thing to at least 6 women over 10 years, always picking women who looked like his high school English teacher who'd rejected him when he was 17. Each woman had either moved away, gone into hiding, or in Jessica's case, been held captive until she escaped, and the pattern was getting worse with each victim. That night, I sat in my apartment with every light on, unable to sleep because every sound in the hallway made me freeze, and I wrote in the journal Anne had suggested I keep. Day 32, still breathing, still afraid, still here. The next morning, I called my dad and told him everything, his voice getting quieter with each detail until he finally said we needed to hire someone who could dig into this guy's past. Within 2 days, Dad had found a private investigator named Rick, who specialized in stalking cases, and we met him at a coffee shop where I laid out everything that had happened since the wedding. Liam keeping someone in his apartment for 3 days makes me wonder how no neighbors noticed or heard anything. Buildings have thin walls, and Jessica must have made some noise during that time. Rick took notes while I talked, occasionally asking questions about dates and locations, and when I finished, he looked at me and said this wasn't his first case like this and wouldn't be his last. He started digging immediately, calling former employers and tracking down old addresses, and within a week he'd uncovered that Liam had been fired from 2 different tech companies for harassment. The first company had multiple complaints from female coworkers about him following them to their cars and sending inappropriate messages, while the second had actually gotten a restraining order to keep him off company property after he kept showing up to see a receptionist who'd rejected him. Rick also found out Liam's mother had died when he was 12 in a car accident, and when he showed me her photo from an old newspaper article, I felt my stomach drop because she looked exactly like me, like Olivia, like all the women in those police reports. For a split second, I felt bad for him, this broken kid who lost his mom, but then I remembered Jessica locked in a room for 3 days, and any sympathy vanished. Josh and I came up with a plan after Rick suggested we needed video evidence, so I posted on my old Instagram about going to this specific Thai place downtown on Friday night. We had 3 of Josh's friends positioned at different tables with their phones ready, and sure enough, Liam walked in 20 minutes after I sat down. He came straight to my table like we'd planned to meet, and I stood up and said loud enough for everyone to hear that I'd told him to leave me alone, and this was harassment. He backed away immediately, but Josh's friend Jake got the whole thing on video, including Liam following me to my car afterward until Josh stepped out and told him to leave. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in a courthouse with that video on my phone, my hands shaking as the judge reviewed everything Rick had compiled plus the restaurant footage. The judge, this older woman with gray hair pulled back tight, granted me a temporary restraining order for 30 days pending a full hearing, and even though it was just paper, it meant any contact from Liam was now officially a crime. I went to the courthouse bathroom and cried for 10 minutes. Not sad tears, but relief tears, like I'd been holding my breath for weeks and could finally exhale. That night, Olivia called me, her voice soft when she said I'd gotten further than she ever did because her first judge had told her she was overreacting to a man who just wanted to talk. We stayed on the phone for an hour, sharing stories about the things Liam had done, the lies he'd told, the way he'd made us both feel crazy for being afraid. She told me she was moving again next month, her 4th time trying to disappear, and we both knew he'd find her again because he always did. The next breakthrough came when Rick discovered Liam had a storage unit on the east side of town, and even though police couldn't search it without a warrant, Rick sat in his car for 3 days until he saw Liam show up with boxes. Rick managed to get photos as Liam opened the unit, and through the gap he could see walls covered with photos, not just of me, but of Olivia, Jessica, and at least 3 other women I didn't recognize. It looked like some kind of shrine, with printed emails and social media posts arranged in timelines, maps with addresses circled, even what looked like hair samples in plastic bags labeled with dates. Rick sent the photos to Detective Torres, who said it still wasn't enough for a warrant, but it would help build the case, especially for Jessica's situation. A month later, I was sitting in a room with fluorescent lights and no windows, telling a grand jury everything about Jessica's case, how Liam had mentioned her at the wedding, how Olivia had told me about the missing girl who'd been his previous fake girlfriend. The prosecutor, this young guy who looked exhausted, warned me that if they indicted Liam, I'd have to testify at the actual trial with him sitting right there watching me the entire time. I said yes immediately because Jessica deserved justice, even if it meant months more of looking over my shoulder and jumping at shadows. The panic attack started getting worse after that, and during my next session with Anne, I finally admitted that I saw him everywhere even when he wasn't there, in every tall man at the grocery store, every car that drove too slow past my building, every shadow in my peripheral vision. Anne prescribed me anxiety medication and taught me these grounding techniques where I had to name 5 things I could see, 4 I could hear, 3 I could touch, but we both knew pills couldn't fix being afraid of someone who actually wanted to hurt me. Even with the restraining order in place, Liam found ways to maintain his presence in my life without technically violating it. He sent letters to all my neighbors warning them that I was mentally unstable and dangerous, that I'd been stalking him and making false accusations, that they should be careful around me. My elderly neighbor, Mrs. Black, who used to bring me cookies and chat about her grandkids, stopped making eye contact in the hallway, and other neighbors started avoiding the elevator if I was in it. The community manipulation felt like walls closing in, like he was isolating me even from my own building, making me the crazy one in everyone else's story. Everything changed when a local reporter named Amy started investigating stalking cases in Portland and somehow found out about mine through court records. She called me asking if I'd do an anonymous interview with my voice disguised, and after thinking about it for 3 days, I agreed, because maybe my story could help someone else recognize the signs earlier than I did. The piece aired on the evening news with my voice altered to sound robotic, but my words were clear as I described the fake relationship, the discovery of his obsession, the months of fear that followed. Within hours, the segment went viral online, and Amy called me the next day to say dozens of women had contacted her with similar stories about different men, some ongoing, some from years ago, all following the same pattern of obsession, manipulation, and escalation. I sat in my apartment reading their messages that Amy forwarded with permission, story after story of women who'd been called crazy, who'd been told they were overreacting, who'd had to uproot their entire lives because some man decided they belonged to him. 3 days later, I was pumping gas at the Shell station on Division Street when I saw Liam's silver Honda pull up to the pump behind me. My whole body went cold as he got out and walked straight toward me, hands in his pockets, that same calm smile he'd worn at the wedding. I dropped the gas nozzle and ran to my car, fumbling with my keys while he stood 10 feet away saying we belonged together, that I was making a mistake. My hands shook so bad I could barely get the door open, and once inside I locked it and called 911 while he stood there watching me through the window. The cops showed up in 12 minutes that felt like 12 hours, arrested him for violating the restraining order, but he was out on bail before midnight. 3 months crawled by with lawyers and paperwork and meetings where Detective Torres built her case piece by piece. She'd found 4 other women who'd been through this with Liam, each with their own horror stories, their own lost months or years. The DA finally